Okay, so I want to do an episode of the show about the Netflix brand reboot of She-Ra for a while now, but I held off of it because, for a change, I didn't just want to jump in and talk about the same shit everyone else was, because I didn't. And also, when it first dropped the first season, I was sort of busy and it took a while to catch up. But the main things that were a big deal, I had kind of lukewarm takes on also, I guess. Like, I think the redesigned characters are good. Look, I'm a child of the era the original comes from. I grew up with the Filmation cartoons and Masters of the Universe, and thus by extension She-Ra, so I have a soft spot for the painterly pulp sci-fi backdrops and heavily recycled stock model figures, but come on, it's good that the characters aren't just the same one male and one female body with different hair and clothes now, and there's a variety of body types and skin tones and faces. That's positive, I dig it. That said, I'm not the biggest fan of the animation itself, which sort of feels like a less detailed, less expensive version of Avatar, kind of. I don't know, it's fine, but these are all pretty good designs. I feel like they deserve to move around more interestingly than they do most of the time, but that's hardly a deal breaker, especially because the writing is solid and that's the important thing.
Are you here to watch the social experiment too?
I also find myself not really caring all that much, at least not as much as I would have expected, about whether or not there will be any He-Man business in it eventually, considering, I probably would have never known what She-Ra was as a kid if it wasn't a He-Man spinoff to begin with.
Hello, He-Man. Sorry you missed all the fun. Who in the world is that?
Teela, Man-at-Arms. This is my friend, She-Ra.
Nice to meet you. Where's Princess Adora?
She's safe.
Right. Safe.
A female He-Man. This is the worst day of my life.
Obviously, it'll be fascinating to see if they do it. I know there's weird rights issues, but it's not the biggest deal to me. What they're doing stands on its own as a solid show for young kids. Cool. Anyway, speaking of He-Man, the original versions of both of these, one of the main reasons this new incarnation plays more interestingly is that it's allowed to have all of the characters, be actual characters. See, there's this misconception that the admittedly mostly extremely cheesy animated shows that dominated much of my era as a kid were often so stilted and flatly characterized was because many of them, like He-Man and She-Ra, were primarily made to market lines of toys, and the people making the shows either didn't care or weren't allowed to do anything interesting because it might get in the way of showing off the products.
Battle Cat and He-Man each sold separately, string not included.
That hook won't stop He-Man. Then traps all his vicious claws.
This is Princess Adora, sister of He-Man, and her gentle horse. Each sold separately, you can pretend. She's lovely as a flower, but she has a secret power.
Now, that wasn't always the case. See, as I think most people are probably now aware, the reason the explosion in licensed cartoons happened in the 80s was because the Reagan administration deregulated aspects of the FCC that had previously mandated children's programming couldn't be just commercials dressed up like entertainment, but they didn't get rid of regulations entirely. So while bureaucrats and legislators were no longer policing kids' TV producers about selling products to children, they often ended up making up the difference by policing the types of content more than ever, not necessarily violence or action, but messaging and attitudes. Okay, your main character can be a doll and you want them to buy it, but it had better model positive behaviors. So whereas earlier kids' cartoon heroes like Yogi Bear or Bugs Bunny were allowed to be, funny jerks who mess with hapless idiots like Ranger Smith or Elmer Fudd just because, merchandising forward protagonists like He-Man and later She-Ra were often kind of boring.
Elena tried taking a magic potion which she thought would help her. Well, she found out there aren't any magic potions. And you know what? There aren't any magic drugs either. Anytime you take one from anybody but your parents or your doctor, you're taking a very big chance. You're gambling with your health, maybe even your life.
Don't expect somebody else to get you out of trouble.
Trouble you put yourself into. The way we did, eh, Glimmer?
I think that you've learned to trust your own abilities and limits, right, Bo?
You're right. But no matter how confident I feel, I'm sure glad She-Ra's around, just in case.
They were always good, they were always right, they always did the correct thing, they always learned or taught the right lesson. That's why all the memes and viral jokes and parodies that have endured about these shows tend to be about the bad guys, like Skeletor or the Evil Horde.
I've been waiting for so long now. I found someone to stand by me.
Because those were generally where the writers had room to cut loose and have fun, because it was still okay for villains to be weird, compelling cartoon screw-ups, because they're the villains. You're not supposed to want to imitate them. Which always left very little tension, because both Skeletor's goofy crew of losers on Eternia and He-Man, and even the supposedly huge, well-organized army of the Horde on She-Ra, both felt like a bunch of dopey, uncoordinated children just flailing around until the competent grown-up heroes would show up and immediately just own their asses. So what the new She-Ra does instead is make all of the characters interesting, because basically everyone is a dopey, uncoordinated child now.
We'll handle this the way we always do.
Brute strength?
Almost dying?
Plus, your friend over there can turn into a, 8-foot-tall lady with a sword, and I want her on my side.
See, they've taken the basic setup from the original series where the Horde is this technologically advanced alien force that's gradually spreading out and taking over a primitive, medieval, fantasy, fairy tale-esque planet, and just like the original, Adora starts out as basically a child soldier who's been raised in the Horde for as long as she can remember, but she finds a magic sword and realizes the Horde is bad now, and it turns out she's destined to become the Amazonian magical girl messiah of the good guys, and there's a whole team of other princes. You get the picture. But the new conceit is that the whole big war that kicked off this whole status quo now seems to have pretty much wiped out and or put way back on their heels most of the grown-ups on the good guy side, while the Horde is kind of all about robots and child soldiers for the most part. So most of the season and a half that's run of this so far has been showing us a war being fought mostly between the forces of light and dark, as represented by angsty, insecure, emotionally compromised teenagers on both sides, with the closest thing we see to an ostensible grown-up actively involved on the ground being Shadow Weaver, the second in command of the bad guys, and she's constantly all tore up by mom feels about Adora/She-Ra. Because at first, the apparent big bad leader of the villains, Hordak, like in the original, isn't really a defined presence beyond, okay, here's the Dark Lord of the bad guy team, partly off screen, we've all seen the same set of stuff this is drawing influence from, so even if you don't know from the originals that the base concept for the Horde was classic monsters but for Masters of the Universe, and Hordak was kind of a big muscly cyborg Dracula, you think you know what you're gonna get. And then when he finally emerges in full, they throw a curve at you.
You mean to tell me that you're still down a Force Captain?
Nothing will stop us from finding Adora and bringing her back.
No. You will elect another Force Captain and resume normal operations.
Yeah. Hordak, it turns out, is the smart one.
But my lord!
Enough. I have made my decision. Rise, Force Captain Catra.
Yeah, the second in command says, hey, so I'm going to take a bunch of resources and manpower to chase down this one AWOL soldier I'm personally fixated on for reasons, and he's like, no, you're not. That's dumb. We're running an army, not a surrogate, whatever your hang-up is, session. This is why we train more than one person for this stuff. Get back to doing what you're supposed to be doing. He recognizes talent, reinforces hierarchy, like it's common sense shit, but seeing as most villains in shows like this get undone by hubris and grandiosity and being obsessive, it's kind of weird to see one who seems to have at least read at least one book on building good management skills. Later on in the first season, there's a bit where Catra goes over Shadow Weaver's head to mess with the bad guy science stuff, and she flips out all, oh, just wait till Hordak finds out. And he's immediately like, what do you mean, wait till I find out? I'm the Dark Lord of this whole thing. I found out right away. And I had them run the idea by me. It sounded good, and I said, yeah, let's see what happens with that. Basically, yeah, the guy running the evil Horde is really good at running the evil Horde. And you realize in short order that that's not good news at all for the good guys, who so far have been eking out wins over another army that's roughly as inept and ill-prepared as they are, mainly on the strength of superhuman powers, and even then, only just so most of the time. Hell, they continually almost lose to Catra, and Catra does not have long-term strategies outside of show up, flirt violently with my crush, and maybe accomplish whatever else I came here to do today.
Hey, Adora. Hey, Adora. Hey, Adora. Hey, Adora. Hey, Adora. Bye, Adora.
Like, when they eventually come up against the guy who's basically just competent, they're going to get their asses kicked. And that's an interesting dynamic. Will they eventually go somewhere actually interesting with it? That remains to be seen, but for now, that's unexpectedly a different thing than I thought I was getting from this. So, I'm here for it. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.